to our talk, our lecture today by Professor Ahmad Sadri. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce to you Professor Sadri. He is an Iranian-American sociologist, author, and translator. He is the James P. Gorter Professor of Islamic World Studies and Professor of Sociology and Anthropology at Lake Forest College in the United States. He is the author of Max Weber's Sociology of Intellectuals, which was published by Oxford University Press and selected as a 1993 Academic Book of the Year by Choice and the publication of American Library Association. He has written 2 books in Persian, Reviving the Concept of Civilizations and Apocalypse Soon, and his published translations including Saddam City from Arabic and Reason, Freedom, and Democracy in Islam from Persian, which is a collection of the works of Abdulkarim Soroush. He lives in Gurney in Illinois. Now, among his other publications is something that you might be very interested to read, is a translation of the Shahnameh, the Epic of the Kings, which is a beautifully illustrated work, and I recommend that you Google it up. And the illustrations are particularly of interest. Now, Professor Sadri has got a twin brother, Mahmoud Sadri, and I think both of them at some points pay for each other's sins because wherever they go, the other one is mistaken by the other one. He's the older one, by the way, I think.
No. 2 hours, Mahmoud is old.
No, he's 2 hours older than him.
Oh, okay.
Well, anyway. Well, without any further ado, I'll pass the floor to Professor Sadri, and then after we finish, we're going to have the Q&A for those of you who have joined us online. Thank you very much. Please join me.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful for this invitation, and even more grateful for the wonderful tour that Dariush gave me of the beautiful building and all its secret wonders and secret gardens. And the hat I'm wearing today is a gift from a great friend of mine, Yasser, and it's I'm going to wear it because I'm so happy with this beautiful gift that he gave me. What's it called?
Chakrali or Pakul?
Chakrali or Pakur?
Pakul.
Well, Pakul. I think I look very fetching in it. Don't you think so? I think Sukut alamat razast in Persian, we say, if you're silent, it means that you exceed. So, and I see some familiar faces in the audience. Very happy that I get to see you after knowing you from afar. And I will start without further ado my presentation, Decoupling Morality and Religion in the Civil Sphere. So this grew out of my interest in the future of religion in a post-Islamic Republic Iran, a time that is coming. We don't know when, but there is no way that it won't come. It will come one day. And actually today I had an interview with the Hargar program of BBC Persian, and it's a very crowded program. You really don't get to say what you want to say in the program, but afterwards we sat down with the anchor, Dariush Karimi, and my interlocutor, and we had a lot of these questions that I got to expand on. My concern is that we Iranians should talk about these issues relating to the place of religion in Iranian society now. Now is the time. We can't wait for the crisis to arrive, and then we are pulling our hair out trying to figure out what happens to religion after 45 years, at least, if it happens tomorrow, or 50 years or 60 years after a tyranny in the name of religion. Where does religion fit? So I developed this cross-tabulation to start the conversation. I have a position, but I usually don't advocate it. I have a position because I think everybody should have a position if we are going to start the conversation. And to start the conversation, we need a framework. And this is the framework for it. There are 4 spheres in society: private sphere, civil sphere, political sphere, and the state, going from the family to where you participate in society without being political, around your interests, whether it's architecture or painting or literature, whatever it is, or embroidery, whatever it is you want to do. And then political sphere, where you participate in the political process, and of course, in the future of Iran, that I hope to be a liberal democracy. And then the state, which is you want to completely occupy the state. And there are only 5 positions on this. The first line is you don't want religion anywhere. This is what we call in Iran din setis. People who obviously, for obvious reasons, have grown to absolutely hate religion and want to destroy it because they think it's a blight on human mind and destroys our rationality. And this is a position taken previously in previous centuries by positivism, and a certain kind of communism that tried to completely destroy religion. And they came to power. Both of these came to power in Latin America and various parts of the world, from China to Afghanistan, especially to Eastern Europe. And so they want to completely banish religion from society, even the private sphere, as much as they can. The second, and I call this strong atheism. The second position is what I call weak atheism, that is kind enough to allow religion in the private sphere. If you want to be religious, when you put on your pajamas and cook your curry in your kitchen, you can talk to God if you want, but nobody else wants to hear about it. We don't want you to talk about it anywhere except to your family and maybe your friends in a private sphere. I call this weak atheism. And then the strong reform, this is a position. Now, that weak atheism is a kind of religiosity that you find in Kierkegaard. You can find it religious experiences as described by William James. I'm very much influenced and very much in love with these 2 philosophers, although my position is not that position, but of course I have a great deal of respect for that understanding of private religiosity that banishes religion from the public sphere, from the civil sphere, because the civil sphere, when other people start to become present, the religion cannot flourish. The absolutely private relation, for instance, between Abraham and his God, is the ideal form of religiosity that Kierkegaard develops in his various wonderful books. As a Shiite, I am into pilgrimage, and I went on a pilgrimage to Denmark to visit the tomb of Kierkegaard. That's how much I love this guy. And nobody in the vast cemetery even knew who is Kierkegaard. And so they eventually, I had a lot of difficulty finding it, and people were saying, like, why do you want to go there? But I went there and I was very affected. I came very close to tears because of my love for this man, this great Christian theologian. Kant also believes that when you postulate a religion, you have to postulate a religion to forestall the dominance of despair. That also falls into this weak atheism. Deism and subjective seculars are in this group. And as I explain this, please make sure to make a mental note to which group you belong. I'm not going to ask anybody, and but to go with the flow of the conversation, decide which group you would prefer and where do you think religion should fit. The first group, strong atheism. The second group, weak atheism. The third group is a strong reform that believes religion should be in the private sphere and the civil sphere, but not in the political sphere, which is competing for getting the power, and definitely not in the state as monopolizing the state control. This is the position that I prefer. This is my preferred position. And I tried in various internet settings with some friends who are in this group, try to advocate for my position. Of course, each position has a strength and weaknesses, including my own position, and I exploited all of them. But I decided that everybody, to participate in this conversation, you should have a position. And the third position is that of weak reform. This is Thomas Aquinas. This is Hegel. This is Christian Democrats. This is the AKP of Turkey. This is the Islamic Party of Indonesia. These are the people who believe Islam or Christianity, religion, belongs in the private sphere. It, of course, belongs in the civil sphere, but they should get out and compete in a democratic setting for power, because when they get to power, they can implement their program. But this is not a ladder that they pull up like most fundamentalists. Once they get to power, then nobody else can compete. If they fail to get the votes, they're going to come down and allow others to rule the state. And the last position is hegemonic religion, that is the position of most fundamentalists. Dominionism in the United States, the people who believe that America is a Christian country, and now shamelessly they call it Christian nationalism, a term that was synonymous to fascism, but they are baptizing it as something that is talked about in polite company, and that's I consider that a great threat to the American democracy where I live. Now, I believe that the first and the last positions don't really belong in liberal democratic society. The first position would prevent you from freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. That is a necessity of your civil rights. And the last position is also undemocratic, because they believe there is only one government, and that's the government of God. And much more importantly, not only there is a government of God, but there is a self-designated people that represent the God, and they are God's only vice-regents on earth. And so I don't think the first and the last, I invite all these 5 groups in Iran to engage in this conversation. I don't expect a lot of constructive criticism and discussion from the first and the last group. They're welcome to join. I hope that they join. But I think the most interesting conversations will happen between the 3 middle groups: the weak atheism, strong reform, and weak reform. This is a conversation we should have in Iran. My own position is a very middle position, a strong reform. But today I'm going to talk in critique of the weak reform. Why? Because when I bring this up with my fellow noandishan dini, or there's a Persianism, we don't call them religious intellectuals, we call them people who are rethinking Islam, because religious intellectuals have gained a different kind of connotation. So I am going to talk about, I'm going to critique weak reform exactly because my colleagues who are very close to me in thinking, the majority of them did not agree with me that we should go for the weak reform. The majority of them opted for a strong reform. The majority of them said that they would prefer a democratic Iran in the future, but they want to compete in the democratic society as a democratic Islamic party. And I think, in my thinking, for the foreseeable future, although religious people have the right to have their own party in any democracy, and in some democracies they do, and in some democracies it works. For instance, in Indonesia, there's nothing wrong with weak reform in Indonesia because they have not dominated the society and they have played the democratic game. And actually, they were instrumental in making Malaysia democratic. So I've decided to dedicate this session to the critique of the weak reform. And the idea of the weak reform, what I heard from my colleagues is that you need some kind of morality in society. And Islam, if it has power, it can produce the morality. We are not going to push people. We are not going to want to take everybody to heaven, as is the claim of this government. We are going to need power in order to be the central moral heart of the society. This is a point of view that is very close to Thomas Aquinas, where Catholicism was supposed to be the center of society. Also very close to Hegel, where in the moment of absolute knowing, we realize that religion is the heart of society as philosophy is its brain. And we realize that we have all been a God, religion, of which we are alienated. And both of these postulate a kind of religiosity that is in the political sphere, in civil sphere, as well as in the private sphere. And so I am going to critique this position in this talk. And in this slide that I'm going to skip, basically I mentioned some of the examples of various positions that take the point of view of these five choices. But of course, I have explained most of them in the previous slide. So what is religion and what is morality? To me, religion and morality are two completely different things. Religion does not belong to morality. Morality doesn't belong to religion. To be moral, you don't need religion. And to be religious, you don't need to be moral. How do I know this? As a sociologist, I usually ask my students or my audiences this question. I'm going to ask you this question. You all know people in your lives who are religious. And you all know in your personal lives people who are not religious. Am I right? The audience, you all know these two groups of people. On the whole, if I ask you, would you say people that you know personally who are religious are more moral collectively than people who are not religious? Very, very few people respond in positive to that. That there is no direct correspondence between these two categories. And I rest my case. People who are moral and religious, they may think they are moral because they are religious. But if they lose their faith, they are not going to turn out to be, I don't know, robbers and rapists and murderers. And people who are immoral under the guise of religion, they will not become more immoral or less immoral if they lose their religion. That is something that is on the basis of my audiences. You know, I want everybody to kind of think about this question. And that I probably can quit right now because the point is made. There is no correspondence between morality and religion. Religion basically comes from religious experiences. We are homo religicus. We human beings, on average, whether this has nothing to do with assuming there is a God or there is supernatural beings, or it doesn't at all relate to that. Ordinary human beings, a good minority of ordinary human beings have had a religious experience. When I ask in my audiences, how many of you have had religious experiences? I won't ask the question here because it's kind of a self-selected group, but usually maybe 20%, sometimes more, 30%, 40% raise their hands. And when most of them voluntarily come to me and talk to me, and they are not usually religious people, but they have had something, maybe a dream that came true. Maybe something happened in reality that there is no physical, logical, scientific explanation for it. People have had these religious experiences. I don't know why. Maybe, I don't know, maybe our brain is bigger than it needs to be. This is what Wallace said, the guy who discovered the law of natural selection with Darwin. And he said the only thing he couldn't figure out is that we are smarter than we need to be evolutionarily. And so why are we smart? We don't know why, but maybe it's because of the size of our brain. Maybe we have some kind of a connection with the noumenal reality that is inaccessible to language. That is why religious experiences usually are above language. People who have them that can't talk about them. Very much like what they say about Tao. Those who know it don't talk. Those who talk about it don't know it. آن را که خبر شد خبری باز نیامد. The one who got the news, you never heard from that person because, of course, the religious experience is ineffable. So maybe once people started to relate this, some people believed them. They came back maybe from their religious experience with songs, with dances, with stories, mythologies. You see a lot of this in the study of shamanism. Shamans have these religious journeys, these shamanic journeys. When they come back with dance. They come back with chants. They come back with ceremonies or things that you have to carry or things that you have to eat or smell or carry around with you. And probably that was the origin of religions. We should not commit the functionalist fallacy. And as a sociologist, I know about functionalist fallacy because we are really guilty of it. Confusing a thing with its function. The greatest of these is Emil Durkheim, who restricts religion in its social function, that is to create some kind of a solidarity in society. Sounds very good. Maybe it's a latent function of religion to also create solidarity. When you get together with people around the fire and you dance and sing, of course, you're going to feel more together. But is that the cause of religion? I doubt that very much. Besides, religion has another latent function. It is very good to create solidarity, but it is once that solidarity is created, it can create religious wars. So it can undo the positive with creating negative. So it is not always a positive thing to have religion. Thomas Hobbes, your fellow London citizen of a few centuries ago, lived through two religious wars, the 30-Year War and the British Civil War. And both of them were absolutely horrific wars in the name of religion. And that is why eventually these people say, you know what? عطایش را به لقایش بخشیدیم. For the two people who know Persian, maybe in the group, I had to say it because it really fits. Maybe we better give up on it because it's very expensive. The 30-Year War was so horrible. I mean, we hear 30-Year War, we just don't know how horrible it was. When Dresden was bombed to smithereens, I mean, the Allied forces, partly in revenge, Churchill was one of them, in revenge for the bombing of London, they basically firebombed the whole city and leveled it. It burned for days. When this happened, the German newspaper said, nothing like this has happened to Dresden since the 30-Year War. And those people didn't have napalm. So 30-Year War was not a joke. Neither was the war of Cromwell and Charles I and the rest. So religion creates wars. It creates solidarity. It may have some moral functions. Maybe it's a buttress for morality, but it also does the opposite. And religion, and these are the dysfunctions of religion. It's not a latent function of religion, it's a dysfunction of religion. And so secularism restores religion, in my view, to its pristine benignity. Religion was benign. It was not an excuse for crusades, for religious wars, for horrifying holy wars, and some forms of jihad. Religion was benign. It was not a political force. But it became a political force during its evolution. So, okay, I skip that and I skip this next slide that is basically evolutionary science arguing that religion really developed from us living together, and the result, it's a theory of developing morality as an iterated prisoner's dilemma game that I really don't have time to expand upon. Let's go to the next slide. Morality is not one thing. Basically, we have a morality which is the result of our post-mammalian brain, our very recent development of the brain. But then we have a reptilian brain and pre-mammalian brain that is in this area. And those pre-mammalian brain really is not that different from a fish brain. We have that. That hasn't gone anywhere. We have the reptile's brain. Even the parts of that part of the brain are named after those of a fish brain. But there is a morality that comes from there, and there is a morality that or more advanced brain. How do we know this? There is, all of you, I'm sure, know about the trolley dilemma. If there is a trolley coming here and it's going to go and kill 5 people, and you have the lever to direct it in this direction, but it can kill 1 person. If you ask this question from people, will you pull the lever? The overwhelming majority of people would say, I will have to. I will kill 1 person instead of 10 people. Probably you would do it too. But if I ask you, are you willing to push somebody in front of this train? Get that person who is tied there, he's in front of you, you can push it on the train tracks right here with your own hands. People are going to say, no, we won't do that. But why not? Isn't it the same thing? We didn't know the answer to this, and actually I used to teach this as a dilemma until the fMRI machines solved the problem. When these are the machines that can look at what part of your brain the blood flows to. When you ask the first question, you are thinking with your more advanced brain with this part. These parts light up like a Christmas tree. You're calculating. This is utilitarian ethics. But when you have to push somebody in front of the train, these parts light up. When you think with your ancient brain, you don't want to push somebody in front of the train. That is really deep in us. But when you are calculating, 1 is better, 1 is better than 10, then it's a different part of the brain. So morality is something very complex, and it's not one thing. When I was contemplating this, I thought of Dostoyevsky's novel Crime and Punishment. In the first part of the novel, spoiler ahead, but I'm sure you all have read Crime and Punishment, and if you haven't, why haven't you? You should have read Crime and Punishment by this time in your life, and of course, Brothers Karamazov. In Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov decides there is this really disgusting old woman who is exploiting people. She's a usurious person and has no mercy, and she's very wealthy. This is in St. Petersburg, and he decides it makes sense to kill that 1 person, took all of her money and distributed it among the people. He's not going to take any money himself. He's going to save 1,000 families and kill only 1 person. And that 1 person is a worthless person. Is old, is going to die anyway, and I'll send her to hell a few months earlier, and I make all these people happy. And he does it. He murders this woman. Second part of the novel, he gets bad conscience because he didn't pull a lever. He actually killed a human being. And then he goes and confesses to his crime and goes to Siberia, things like that. So this is exactly the same thing. Like the first part of the novel, he's thinking with his utilitarian brain. Second part of the novel, his conscience is that of the chimpanzee, is that of the reptile. He killed a human being with his own hands. So again, this idea of morality coming from religion really doesn't jive with any of the complexities of morality. The second book I'm going to talk about is Brothers Karamazov. In my view, it's the best novel ever written. I've read a lot of novels, but please, if you haven't read Brothers Karamazov, read it. It is. I read it for the 5th time this last between the 2 semesters, the break, and I was alone in the house with my cats, of course, but I talk to them. They don't talk back, thank God. Those of you who are my Facebook friends, you all know the names of my cats and they're familiar with them. When I put the book down and I looked around, the entire world looked like less real than the book. The book is so real that the reality pales in comparison to the book. It is that good. So there is a problem with the book because Jean-Paul Sartre misquoted one of the characters in the book, Ivan Karamazov. And you have probably heard it. I heard it when I was a student at the University of Tehran, a freshman. I thought, that is such a profound thing to say. And this is the misquotation of Sartre of what Ivan Karamazov said. If there is no God, anything is permissible. So we need God. Who is going to say what is good and what is bad if there is no God? And I was very impressed by that. I'm not impressed by that anymore. By the way, Ivan Karamazov never says this. This is a misquotation. He must have said it because other people in the novel quote him to that effect, and he doesn't object to it. One of the people who quotes him to that effect is a devil of his mind. He's a delusion that comes and talks to him and says anything is permissible. And his illegitimate brother, Smerdyakov, is inspired by this and kills their father, Fyodor, named after Dostoyevsky himself. But is it true? Is it true if there is no God, anything is permissible? Ivan writes a couple of things, fictional writings. One is an essay on ecclesiastical courts, and the other one is a poem called The Grand Inquisitor. And both of these have become very, very famous in literature and social sciences. And I don't have time to go into this. If I had more time, like if I had 5 hours, probably I would. But I don't think that it's going to give me 5 hours. So I'll show you a few slides to refresh your mind. So this is Kierkegaard, who calls Abraham the knight of faith, exactly because he obeys God. The greatest act of obedience is that of Abraham. But what did he obey God in? To kill his son. Is that moral? Is that ethical? Isn't that a crime? If anybody told you, I had a dream and God told me to kill my child, what would you do? You would call, in America, it's 911. I don't know what it is here. You would call the cops. Right? This guy has gone crazy. You better. That's a crime. That's not a moral thing. But at the same time, religion doesn't happen at the level of society. Religion happens for Kierkegaard at absolute loneliness. There is nobody else present. And when God commands you, you better not question the command. Abraham doesn't even speak to his wife. He just gets his son, gets a donkey, gets a dagger, he's on his way. He's the knight of faith. And in this book, Fear and Trembling, that's another book that I hope you all have read. If you haven't, take a note and read it before you die. It is an absolutely devastating book. So basically, if you look at religion doesn't happen at the level of society for Kierkegaard, and morality is something purely social. These two things are completely at different levels. And that's the greatest painting of Caravaggio showing the anguish of Jacob, or for Muslim Ishmael, under his father's knife. This is Kant's view. Kant also belongs in this level of weak atheism, the whole idea is that you have to postulate God and eternity, because if you don't postulate God and eternity, you refer to your own mind, you realize that your passions are stronger than your sense of duty. We all have the sense of duty. We all know what is good and bad. The problem is not in not knowing what is good and bad. The problem is to make your duty stronger than your wishes. And that, over the long term, we are not likely to do. Just refer to your own experience. Because deep down we know this, that we embody this radical evil. In the Calvinist language, the total depravity of mankind. Kant's mother was a Scottish Calvinist, and many people believe that this is where it's coming from. But Kant says, like, refer to yourself. If you have that sense, you have that sense that everybody is at least as bad as you. Then what hope is there for society? So we have to postulate a God, even if there is absolutely no God, because we need that in order to survive this inner sense that between beauty and duty, we are going to choose beauty. And that picture on the right is based on a joke that Schopenhauer made at the expense of Kant, because Kant, of course, in his philosophical writings, he totally rejects the idea of proofs of God and considers and completely destroys all of the proofs of God given, because he says God cannot be proven. But then in his writings on religion, he says we have to postulate a God. And Schopenhauer says, and that God actually, it looks very much like a Calvinist God and Christian God. And so Schopenhauer says there was a man who was happily married for a long time, and then the love had kind of waned. He and his wife were not really in love anymore. They were bored. And so one day he goes to this masked party, to this ball, to this masquerade, and he encounters this very beautiful woman who is in a mask, and she is very vivacious. She speaks, and he falls in love with her, and she comes to the door, and she takes off her mask, and she's his wife. And so Schopenhauer says this is Kant's religion. He rejects religion, and then the religion that he creates ends up looking exactly like the religion that he had given up on. And when I talk to my students about Kant's idea of radical evil, I give the example of this movie that was made probably 20 years ago called Indecent Proposal. There's a millionaire who encounters this couple who are financially in trouble, and he offers to give them a lot of money so they can get married. And Kant says the way evil prevails over good in us, it happens in three stages. The first one is fragility, because our mind is fragile. We entertain the idea of doing evil, beauty over duty. The second one is impuritas. There is impurity that comes alive in us when we are faced with the choice between duty and satisfying our desires. And the third is engaging in evil act, that is viciousness. So in this movie, that millionaire offers this indecent proposal. What do the couple do? What's the right thing to do? To tell the millionaire to go to hell. They are not going to do something illegal, because the millionaire is offering to give them the money for one night of carnal love with the woman. This is an indecent proposal. If you receive this proposal, and if you are in need, you still should say no. There's only one decent answer to that indecent proposal. But they don't say no. They say, Isn't that funny? Look at this guy. What a funny millionaire. Ha ha. But they are considering it. The fact that they're considering it is the beginning of the fall because they are fragile minds. And then impuritas is when they start entertaining ideas about how they could do it. If they would do it, of course, they would not do it. But if they were going to do it, how would they do it? This is impurity. Now they are developing scenarios for doing evil. So one of them, the Demi Moore, the actress, says to Woody Harrelson, her boyfriend, she says, what if we assume that I met this millionaire before we met and had a one-night stand with him? Would that be a problem? No, it would be in the past. Why don't we assume that it happened in the past? Then we get the money and we get married and everything is going to be roses. They are really developing plans to do evil. This is impurity. And there is only one step after that, doing it. And that is viciousness. So actually in these three steps, this is how we are overcome by evil. The radical evil wins over us. And so this is how I explain this to my students. In my next book, which is based on the story of Cat and the Mice, a poem, 111-line poem written in the 13th century by Obeid of Zākān. Those Iranians who know this story. How many of you know this story? One, two, and three. So anyway, the cat. It's a famous. It's a famous satirical poem. It's about a cat who eats a mouse. Gets very. He regrets doing that. He feels guilty. Goes to the mosque and he pledges to God to never do that again. That he has been a bad cat, and from now on he's going to be a vegan, something like that. And he's fasting, he's crying, and a mouse in the mosque is hiding. He goes and tells the mice, good news, the cat has become a Muslim, and he's not going to eat mice anymore. So they decide to go and offer a peace treaty forever between mice and cats. And naively, they walk into the den, the lair of the cat. What do you think the cat did? You guessed it. The cat ate all the mice. Of the 7 mice, he manages to eat 5 of them. But how did he convince himself to eat the mice? All these 3 steps happen there. Once the mice come in, the cat says, oh, look at the mice. A moving feast, you know, but I have repented. What do I do? So this is what I'm going to do. Actually, God has seen how pious I am, and God has rewarded me with all these mice. What's a good cat to do? Reject God's generosity? And of course, then he says, so that is the first 2 steps. And the third step is, he says, come forward, let us group hug and sing Kumbaya together. This is when he's really deceiving the cats, the mice. And the mice know what is going to happen, but it's too late. So they walk around, I'm about to come closer, close enough, and the cat jumps down and eats them. So Obeid of Zākān also was aware of radical evil. This is what he's telling the people. You, the people, are the mice, and the rulers are the cats. Don't trust the cats if you're a mouse. Most Iranians misread this. They have misread it, I believe, for 800 years. They think that the cat was being hypocritical. But this is not at all in this story. The cat in the mosque was not being a hypocrite because he was alone. His repentance was sincere. He went back on his repentance because he justified it. That is what we do when we want to do evil, like these people in that movie. They overcome their morality by justifications. That is what all of us have done. When we do something that is immoral, we justify it to ourselves. And this happens in the same way. So this next picture is a picture of the Unitarian Church of Northbrook in Chicago. I've given several talks there. Unitarians don't have any dogma. They don't believe in Trinity. They don't believe in a God that has a name. They are basically spiritual people. This is an example of Rousseau's civil religion. It's a religion. People come together for loving, but not for hating anybody else. And so this is one example of that kind of religiosity in pure form. Again, Jefferson wrote a Bible. He edited the Bible called Jefferson's Bible. And he edited all the unseemly things in it, the miracles and, curing people with miracles and casting out the devils into the pigs and all that stuff. He considered that undignified and has a cleaned up gospel. I have a copy of it. I haven't read it. I haven't encountered anybody who has read it. It's the most unread book, one of the most famous books. Why? Because people don't want to read that. That is too cleaned up. Religion reflects both our evil side and our good side. And that is why we are attracted to a religion. When you want to reform a religion, don't go with a machete. Go with a scalpel. And only reform the parts that are in contradiction with civility, with democracy, with human rights. If you try to excise all the violence and all the unseemly things out of religion, you have thrown out the baby with the bathwater. Religion, those who want to reform religion have to be very minimalist. Rather than reinventing everything, you have to be very respectful of traditional religion because it is there for a reason. Don't think you're smarter than everybody else. A lot of Muslim reformers, a lot of Iranian reformers go at it with a machete rather than with a scalpel. And this is another movie that I use for my students. It's called, what movie is this from? Wizard of Oz. And you remember when Alice goes behind the scene and he realizes that the Wizard of Oz, of whom she wanted to get all these demands for her friends and for herself to go back to Kansas, and the lion gets a heart, and all of that. If Hegel was writing this story, if Hegel was the director of this movie, you know what would happen here? Dorothy would see the old man and she would say, "Oh my God, I am him. I am the old man. I am the voice of God, except I didn't know that I am the voice of God." This is the moment of absolute knowing for Hegel. I am the voice. I am God. We are God. The society becomes God. And this really merges with that position, the weak reform. You have, and this is where I come back to St. Thomas Aquinas. What is wrong with the idea of saying religion is there to back up morality? One of the main things that happens is that then you have only one religion. If the German society has developed this Christianity until at the time of Hegel, it just so happens when Hegel is alive, Germany arrived at the moment of absolute knowing through Hegel's mind. Where do the Jews fit in? Everybody has to be Lutheran. If Shiite Islam, the 12er Shiite Islam, is the Sitlikite, is the morality of Iranians, what do other religions do? What do Jews do, Christians do, Sunni Muslims do, other forms of Shiites that exist in Iran do? So the problem of this, assuming one religion representing morality in society, is that it becomes a totalitarian kind of morality. And it rejects the idea of pluralism in society. And nothing good will come out of that. So I'm going to end in the last few minutes that I have by jumping over some of the slides. You'll be happy to know. Basically, the religious people including Kant, assume that evil is in our nature. And to some extent, they are right. There is both evil. We are hardwired for both evil and good. Our brain is hardwired for kindness and cooperation, as well as violence. We have the hormones for them. We have organs in our brain that are set for both kindness and for violence. But social scientists, philosophers, Hobbes, Rousseau, and the social psychologists, Solomon Asch, Milgram in his Obedience to Authority, Zimbardo in his Prison Experiments, Hannah Arendt in her Banality of Evil, they all assume evil doesn't come from our nature. It comes from our interaction. For instance, Milgram, if somebody stands there with a white coat and tells you to shock somebody in the next room, and you hear that person screaming, and every time you say, like, maybe I don't want to do it, it's enough for this guy with a white coat to say the experiment should go on. And the majority of people keep pushing that button because somebody in authority, just because he has a white coat, told you to do it. It doesn't come from inside of you. It comes from the interaction. Rousseau in his Emile doesn't teach any religion to his imaginary son that he's bringing up in the woods. But when he's going to come into the society, says, since you're going there, there's going to be a rat race there. You need religion when you're in contact with other people. And I'm going to end with this idea of prudential pessimism that is the basis of the American Constitution. The founders of the American Constitution, these young people, these people were in their 20s and 30s when they devised this absolutely magnificent document that is the American Constitution. I'm aware of the fact that many of them were slave owners and descendants of slave traders and things like that. But at the same time, I believe they lived a contradiction, that the document is a worthy document. I think what is happening here is that James Madison follows this idea that we are evil by nature. He agrees with this idea of radical evil. And the way to solve that problem is to create a system of checks and balances, a system of making people the sentinels of public good, not for the public good, but for their private interests. If you divide the elites and make them each other's watchers, then they are going to control each other's evil that comes from living together. So I think this is, again, the same idea that Obeid of Zākān had in the 13th century of prudential pessimism. Assume every man is a knave. This is a saying by Hume that is taken up by another founding father of the American Constitution, Alexander Hamilton. Every man should be assumed to be evil. We are all cats. And none of us are trustworthy because we can do evil and then justify it to ourselves like the cat did, or like that couple did in that Indecent Proposal. So it's not that people are evil. You don't want to be cynical like that, but it is prudent to assume nobody can be trusted as far as you can throw them. So even if the American president does something untoward in the Oval Office, like Bill Clinton did, he can be impeached. You impeach, everybody is impeachable. So the social system can be set in a way to control that radical evil in us. And that is why I think that document is a great document. Private interest, and that is the underline, the sentence, private interest of every individual may be a sentinel over the public rights. And and Hume's sentence, every man ought to be supposed a knave and to have no other end in all his actions but private interest, although many people are not names. But if you are a mouse, assume every cat is going to be like the cat in Obaid's story. If you want to be alive, be cynical. And that is good for your health. That is the point that is pushed to this point in the 13th century by Obaid, but the American founding fathers took this and went the extra step and created a system, the liberal democratic system, that is now followed by the overwhelming majority of these 180 some countries in the United Nations. Everybody says we are liberal democracies, even if they are not. Why they're lying? Because everybody knows this is a system that that has passed its test. I am entirely open with this. I think this is the best system, the best of all possible systems. It's not the best utopian system, but of all the systems that we have thought about, this is the best system of self-government, and that is what I want for Iran. I'm clear. I don't have a black box. What I want for Iran is what has passed its examination for more than 200 years, almost 300 years, not only in the United States, but everywhere in the world, even in a country that is formally a theocracy, such as the British Empire, but they are only in name a theocracy. In reality, they are a democracy. So is every other country. What I want for Iran is not something mysterious. What I want for Iran is what everybody else has, not because it's ideal, but it's because it is the best that we have, and because they have arrived at a good definition of morality, of human nature, and how to deal with the evil of those problems. Thank you very much for your indulgence and for the extra time you gave me. Thank you.